Why do they come back after rejecting you? Have you ever truly paused to ask yourself that? Why someone who walked away, who left you in silence, who looked you in the eye and said they were done, ends up circling back as if they never let go? Rejection carves a quiet wound. But what if that wound isn't the end of the story? In today's video, we're not just asking that question, we're answering it. We're going to explore the real reasons people come back after they've walked away, the subtle truths beneath their return, the emotional shifts they never expected, and the part of you they finally start to see too late. Because sometimes, when you stop chasing, when you start healing, when you rise instead of reaching, they feel it, and they come back, not because you waited, but because you didn't. If that speaks to you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Stoic Station, where we turn silence into strength and heartbreak into transformation. Now, let's dive in. Reason number 1. Your energy changed, and they can feel it without knowing why. They can't quite explain it, but they feel it. Something in the air shifts when you walk into a room, even if you're not in theirs anymore. You've stopped being the man who overextends, over-explains, and overgives. You no longer orbit around their absence or question your own worth in the quiet they left behind. There's a stillness in you now, a centered presence that speaks louder than any words ever could. You've changed, not just in thought, but in vibration. Your posture is more grounded, your breath slower, deeper. Your gaze no longer seeks recognition or rescue. It emanates clarity. You're not trying to be seen. You are seen because you've begun to see yourself. And in the stillness between you, they feel it. They may be far away, tangled in distractions, but that invisible thread that once tied you together, it tugs differently now. You're no longer pulling from your side, and the slack catches them off guard. That detachment you've cultivated isn't cold or cruel, it's calm. It says, I am enough, whether you return or not. And that kind of energy, it's unforgettable. It's magnetic. Because when a man is at peace with himself, when he no longer chases validation or clings to the past, he becomes something few can resist, and even fewer can replace. Start journaling your transformation, not for them, not to prove anything, but for you. Let every word be a witness to your becoming. This is not just growth, it's your return to yourself. Reason number 2. You're building a life that doesn't include them, and that scares them. They thought time would stand still for them, that you would, that even in their absence your world would remain on pause, frozen in that familiar waiting room of silent hope and emotional limbo. But something unexpected happened. You didn't just survive the silence, you used it as soil. Instead of lingering in heartbreak, you chose reinvention. You built new routines that didn't require their approval. You picked up the pieces, not to fix the past, but to sculpt something better. You started that business you once only talked about. You got serious about your health, your growth, your peace. You finally took that trip, not to escape, but to expand. And somewhere between that sunrise hike and that coffee shop conversation with a new friend, you remembered who you were before the longing. Maybe it was something as simple as getting up one morning and deciding you weren't going to check their social media anymore. That day, you took your daughter to school, went to the gym for the first time in months, and booked a long postponed weekend away to the mountains. You smiled when your co-worker complimented your energy. You didn't realize it then, but that was the first day of your new life. Quiet, steady, yours. To them, it's just a stream of photos, a smiling version of you they thought was dependent on their affection, but behind every image is something deeper they can't unfeel. You're not performing, you're healing, you're thriving. You're no longer just doing okay. You're rebuilding a life so whole that it no longer includes them, not out of resentment, but because there's simply no room for what no longer aligns. That's what unsettles them, not your joy, but your ability to reclaim it without them. It's not that you've moved on, it's that you didn't need to fall apart first. They expected devastation. What they found instead was a man too grounded to be broken twice by the same loss. So go further. Reconnect with what once lit you up before love clouded your vision. Pick up that guitar. Rejoin that hiking group. Get back into that workshop, that studio, that place where your soul breathes freely. Because the more alive you become, the less anyone can anchor you to who you used to be. And nothing is more powerful or more terrifying to someone who let you go than watching you rise without needing to look back. Reason number 3, they thought the grass was greener until they found only weeds. In the age of instant gratification and endless swipes, it's easy to believe there's always something better waiting just beyond what you have. Maybe that's what happened. They convinced themselves that what you shared was just comfortable, that someone more exciting, more mysterious, more thrilling had to be out there. So they left, not always with cruelty, but with curiosity, with the belief that love should feel like a high, not a home. At first, they may have enjoyed the buffet, new faces, flirtations, the novelty of being wanted by someone unfamiliar. There's a rush in that, no doubt. But eventually, the highs flatten out, and the reality of inconsistency begins to wear on them. Late replies, empty compliments, surface-level chemistry that never quite settles into anything deeper. They begin to see that the thrill they chased came with a cost, the loss of something stable, honest, and rare. Because you weren't just consistent, you were present. You listened when they needed to vent. You made space for their bad days without withdrawing your affection. You weren't perfect, but you were real, and that's not something they've found easily since. What they once dismissed as predictable now echoes in their memory as safe. What they called routine now feels like reliability. You weren't a placeholder. You were the exception. And now, in moments of silence, after a date that went nowhere or a conversation that left them feeling unseen, they remember the way you made them feel, not entertained but understood, not impressed but anchored. And while they may not admit it outright, that memory begins to haunt them. Because the truth is, when someone walks away thinking they'll upgrade, only to discover that quality can't be mass-produced, the regret runs deep. But here's where you take back your power. You don't chase. You don't compete. You don't try to convince anyone of your value. Let their wandering confirm what you already know. You were never meant to be compared. You were the standard, the conclusion, the one they look for in every face after you and fail to find. So hold your ground, not in bitterness, but in quiet knowing. Because when someone realizes that what they left behind was never ordinary, it's not their apology that matters. It's your evolution that speaks loudest. Reason number 4. You're with someone else now, and that changes everything. There's a peculiar irony in how people value what they no longer have access to. When you were fully available, open-hearted, loyal, consistent, they took their time. They hesitated. Maybe they assumed you'd always be there, or maybe they believed you weren't going anywhere, no matter how distant they became. But now you're in someone else's life. Someone else sees you, listens to you, values what they once overlooked, and suddenly you're no longer just a memory, you're a loss. It's not always love that brings them back. Sometimes it's ego, bruised by the sight of you smiling next to someone new. Sometimes it's fear, the quiet panic that maybe they gave up something irreplaceable. And sometimes it's just the haunting voice of "what if," whispering doubts into the spaces they tried to fill with distraction. They don't just miss you, they miss the feeling of being chosen by you. They miss the warmth of knowing they mattered in your world. And when they see someone else receiving that space, that affection, that laughter. They realize what they walked away from. But realization isn't always redemption. Here's the truth most don't want to admit. Not every return is rooted in clarity. Some comebacks are driven by a need to know they still have a place in your heart, even if they have no intention of truly being part of your life again. They want to know the door hasn't locked behind them, that the light's still on, just in case. That's why you must be still and discerning. If they show up while you're with someone new, don't be swayed by familiarity or nostalgia. Watch their actions, not their apologies. Let time reveal whether it's genuine regret or just insecurity in disguise. Because a second chance isn't something you give lightly. It's something they earn through consistency, courage, and clarity. Reason number 5. They finally realized they lost something rare, and it hurts. Some realizations don't crash in like a storm. They arrive quietly, like a soft ache that builds in silence. Maybe it's a familiar song on a drive home, or passing by the coffee shop where you used to sit together. Maybe it's lying awake one night with nothing left to distract them when it finally hits. They had something real, something grounded, something rare, and they let it slip away. Not every ex is out there thriving. Some are simply surviving, carrying the weight of words they didn't say, moments they didn't appreciate, and the version of you they never truly understood. For a long time they may have run into new people, into work, into noise, but time has a way of slowing everything down. And when it does, memory becomes a mirror. They don't just miss the relationship, they miss who they were when they were with you. But here's the thing, by the time that realization reaches them, you've changed. Not out of anger, but out of necessity. You've grown in the quiet. You've healed without needing closure. You've learned to live without their validation, and in doing so, you became someone stronger. So don't wait for them to remember your worth. Instead, wake up every day and embody it. Don't ask, what if they come back? Ask, am I living like a man worth returning to? Then let that question shape your habits, your decisions, and your future. Because the rarest thing they lost was someone who found wholeness without them. Summary. In short, they don't come back because you waited. They come back because you didn't. Because instead of sitting in the aftermath of their absence, hoping for a call or a sign, you chose to reclaim your life. You didn't freeze time or build your world around their return. You got up. You moved forward. And in that quiet, unwavering decision to live fully again, you became someone they never truly saw, but now can't seem to forget. There's something undeniably powerful about a man who doesn't beg, doesn't chase, doesn't crumble. A man who, when faced with loss, turns inward, not to escape, but to rise. You didn't post to prove a point. You didn't date to make them jealous. You simply returned to yourself. And that version of you, the one who isn't shaped by someone else's absence, is the version that lingers in their mind long after the goodbye. Because you didn't wait, you evolved. You outgrew the chapter they abandoned. And in doing so, you became more than a memory. You became the man who made peace louder than pain, who chose growth over grief. And that, more than anything, is what they'll never be able to forget. If this message spoke to something deep within you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to Stoic Station, where strength, clarity, and purpose come together. Your evolution starts here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.